Engines fire up when ready to help it soar. Flight 370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur. Mayday, mayday, dangerous lithium-ion battery fire. 239 lives, a risk situation so dire. Lost contact with this Boeing commercial airplane. Faulty satellite data being the weak link in this chain. 20 superconductor scientists on this flight. Does that have anything to do with it? It just might. 1, 2, 3, plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's the 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology. These EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 off with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. Where did it go? What's the notion? Which island? Which ocean? It didn't crash in the sea or on land. Fourth port out west for this sleight of hand. For 4 days the passengers' phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found impossibly in the wrong ocean. Dark energy, ether, cold fusion, 0-point energy. Not solid, liquid, or gas, plasma is the key. A paradigm shift in our technology. An unlimited reservoir of energy. Floating through the air, round and round, as we stand helpless on the ground. Or flight defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblowers dying or getting disappeared. Heads of industry saying nothing to see here. Isn't that just a little weird? By humans this was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3, plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's the 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology. To these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 off with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is the spiel. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to Flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.
Well, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. So that was a song about MH370 that was done by a friend of mine or somebody I know on X. They didn't really want recognition for it other than just showing that and where that you can find their music on Suno, I guess. So we've been going over the One Minnesota program, Horizons, and we've gone over a little bit about Harlan Cleveland, the World of Futures Society, and Minnesota's part in that, which is the Minnesota's Future Conference, their commission. Okay, the commission, part of that is legislators, part of it's business people. And they've been advising the state since the 70s on how the state should run, including doing the demographic forecasts and everything else, and what industries we're deciding to be in and not. And it's just interesting because a lot of these people have intelligence ties or ties to the U and other organizations that are questionable. Not that the UNFM in itself is questionable, but the U has done questionable things. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the tab of, if it will, there we go. So you can actually look this up on your own where the One Minnesota stuff is. Okay. And so far we've gone over this part, and we are on, I think, audio part 2, I believe. We're going to go ahead and, that was like for the Q&A. We've already completed the Q&A. we are on the changing demographics and the future of Minnesota's economy. And that was put on by the two Toms. I'm going to go ahead, though, and show you this graph, though, that they did. And hopefully, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and click present. Boom. Okay. So this is the main thing of what they're, the point that I want to get at with what they're talking about is the dependency rate. Okay. And the number of people. So the dependency rate is, so the rate of number of people that are like dependent on you. It used to be, the reason why it was so high in the 60s was because everybody with all those kids, all the baby boomer kids, right? But as we go on here, from 2007, they were talking about that it was going to increase dramatically by 2011, the number of people that are over the retirement age versus the number of people that are in the 18 to 24-year-old range. And there's myriad of reasons for that. Okay. But this was from 2010 to 2020, a whole bunch more retirement and long-term care age. Okay. And then less growth down here. And in fact, we're losing some down here. Okay. This is your tax base. Yes, after that, you have the middle-aged people, right? The prime working age people here. That growth rate is very low, though. And in here, so the new entrance into the workforce plateaus. Okay. And the standard of living depends on how many widgets you make and how many hours that you made those widgets, right? Or the value that you've added. Okay. As a ratio of workers to residents decline, the productivity will need to increase. So they're going to expect more work out of you per hourly unit to have the same, to produce the same amount with less people. So either you need to make more, or we need to have more people, or we need to expect there to be less output. Which most of those right there, the one thing that we have done is add people. Well, how did we add people? So here's the graph about the dependency, right? It's going to rise again to the old age. Okay. The growth rate. Competition for future workforce will increase because there's less people. If there's less people, you're going to have less people in the workforce. There's going to be more competition for businesses to get people. Okay. We moved into and as they talked about in the previous ones, we moved into a service economy from a industrial economy. Not all of those services, though, provide a value added. You're taking what is already there and you're adding value to other people, maybe making them more productive, making more people into the workforce that aren't in the workforce. But Minnesota has a naturally high rate of workforce participation. And because we have a naturally high rate of workforce participation, it's hard to be able to get any increase in what's already there. Okay. So workers and wages depend on the value of their product, right? And the amount produced. If we are to be successful, everyone's talents must be fully used. So what they did here is they decided that, okay, this natural rate, this includes Native Americans, this includes Black Minnesotans, naturalized Minnesotans, and as far as when I say naturalized Minnesotans, I should say people that were born here, right, that are natural citizens. And then obviously the white population too, right? Migration is your refugees, your illegal migration and that. Okay, and there's your participation rate. So there was some natural growth there, but then it begins to decline. So your natural growth declines. Well, if we haven't done a good job of tapping into, I don't know, I'm just going to say like the inner city, right? If we haven't done a good job of tapping into everybody here, we're not going to increase the number of people in the workforce, right? So we could increase this naturally using our own natural citizens. I don't know, like people on the north side or south side of Minneapolis, maybe get them some cool skills that they would be able to pay the bills and have a good job and that. But instead, what we've done is we've imported them. See, um, right here, right there, and beyond. And they plan to import more. But with Trump shutting this down, how will that play out? Right? Because we are very dependent upon that. And the number of college students and everything else uh, is also dependent on that. So our entire system is set up around that. Because if we would have naturally had a decline in the college enrollment, what would happen is that some of those schools would have to specialize. Not every school is going to be able to have all those programs. And some of the programs that are not value added, like underwater basket weaving, whatever else, you're going to have to get rid of, right? Because they're not going to be able to have a job in that. So right here, students of color are increasing while white students are declining. So, you know, this is where our future sort of is if this is declining, because these are our future workers, right? So especially if they're naturalized citizens or they were born here, right? We should probably make sure that we set these people along with these people that are still here, right? And I'm not saying exclude whites up for success, but what they've done is they put this person against that person. Well, having these people succeed. And so that's sort of what they've done. Okay, here's the high school graduation rates, right? And not much has changed on this. It's gone down. So like instead of it being at 87%, now everybody's a little bit lower. Same thing with the ability to actually have workforce that is trained ready to go. You have to retrain everybody or train them on stuff that is very basic. Did not complete high school rate, again, very high. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just play the last little bit of last week's episode. And there's a reason for that. That's because I think what they have to say at the end there is very key. And these slides that I showed you are key to that. Okay. And I'm going to start it at the 47 mark. And then I have to get it queued up and figure out which which audio file it was. But here we go. We're going to go. The reason I'm doing this, instead of me just giving you an overview of what we went over last time, I think it's good for you to be able to see it for yourself or hear it for yourself. Because Tom and Tom do a very, very good job. Okay, so that's a recap from last week, and we're just gonna go ahead and hop right in to the audio and continue that audio. But again, the key thing to remember is that they chose to push more production for less money onto people. They would expect more of us than they did of the past generations to be able to take care of the baby boomers who are very entitled. Okay, those entitlements won't necessarily be there for the rest of us. And they also have decided to not invest in Americans and instead invest in foreigners who are literally replacing us, and the costs associated with that are being put on us. As you see Doge being coming out with everything, it's becoming very, very apparent on that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and share over here to this tab and keep on going with that audio. I guess it might not be playing the audio. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to see if I can fix that. I guess it might not be playing the audio. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to see if I can fix that. I guess it might be playing the audio. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to see if I can fix that. Okay, give me 1 second here. I guess it's again not sharing the audio. Um,
that is followed by a 30% increase. That's the kind of increase that we never see in demographic numbers. This is a huge ledge. This is a huge jump. It is the same thing that drove hospitals almost crazy in the late in the late 40s and through the 50s. And just simply, how do we have enough capacity to be? It's the same thing.
Okay, we got the audio back.
Able to accommodate all the babies that are being born. And then we had to build all sorts of schools for these young people and train teachers, and we did that, and our parents invested in that, and they built the junior high schools, then they built the high schools, and then we built the colleges and universities to accommodate this large generation. And now this generation is beginning to reach towards the end of its expected work life, and a dramatic change will take place. This is not business as usual. And if we return to the longer run and think in terms of growth of the workforce, and remember, as we pointed out, you either increase the number of people making stuff or you increase the amount of productivity, the amount of stuff each person makes. Growth, economic growth, is dependent upon both of those, and in the future, the growth in the number of bodies in the workforce, the number of people making stuff, is going to slow dramatically. And in fact, this shows a gold bar that actually the forecast that our projection we made earlier this decade, and frankly right now I think it's optimistic. And these projections if anything, they are on the optimistic side, and yet they are showing a dramatic decline in the rate of growth. This will not be just a Minnesota phenomenon. This will be a phenomenon that we will see around the nation. The difference is that Minnesota is already one of the most fully employed economies in the world. We have very little room for future increase. We share with North Dakota the highest proportion of adults who are actually working. We have the highest participation rate of women in the paid workforce. We have one of the highest participation rates of men in the paid workforce. The vast majority of Minnesotans are already working, and we have relatively modest room for increases in the future. And this search for talent, this is that Economist journal again. The search for talent is becoming a major issue in Minnesota and the nation.
Actually, as you found out, The Economist isn't just a U.S. publication, it's an international publication, and this search for talent is a global challenge. And it's not just a search for the best and the brightest. We need to be able to make the most of every individual's talent in there. Each individual needs to be as productive as possible if this economy in this state is going to succeed and grow the way it has in the past. That's the challenge that states and regional economies have looking on into the future, making the fullest use of everybody's talent, because labor is going to be scarce. So the way you're going to grow is you're going to grow through more productivity. Now let me show you real quickly here a graph that shows the growth rate for the crucial 18 to 24-year age group going off into the future. Now this 18 to 24-year age group, Tom's talked about a little bit, but that's the new entrance to the workforce. That's what we've got to be aware of. And what you can see is that Minnesota actually from 2000 to 2005 was in pretty good shape. That age group was growing faster in Minnesota than it was nationally. But then you see for the next 5 years, we're going to almost be flat. That age group is not going to grow, and it's going to grow faster nationally. And then it's going to shrink. It's going to grow more. It's going to fall more than the national average over the next decade as well. This raises some real interesting questions about where is the labor force going to come from for business for the Minnesota economy in the future.
This is key because they chose this. It could have came from Native Americans, right? The Native people that are here. But instead, they chose to go a different way. And as people sort of like rise out of poverty and are actually able to afford a home, they have more kids than that, right? But if you're not able to afford a home, you're not going to really have, well, kids. And remember, 2008 hit right after this. The market collapse or whatever else. And that really put a lot of people far, far behind.
Raises some real interesting questions about higher education, about tuition policy. I don't know about you, but I think that it's probably going to be easier to recruit somebody off the campus from the University of Minnesota than off the beach in San Diego. That's one of the things that we have to begin thinking about is as we have this decline in the number of people of working age, how are we going to make sure that we have good access to that workforce that we need in there? We need to prepare the entrance to the workforce in such a way that they will be successful and they will be productive as they go on. Now, what kind of jobs are we going to have to be preparing them for? A consulting firm, McKinsey & Company, says there are really three types of jobs in the future. There's jobs called transformational jobs, which transform raw products into useful consumer products. There are transactional jobs, or jobs where the interactions can be easily scripted or automated. And then there's what's called tacit jobs, which require complex interactions requiring different levels of judgment. Jobs that are know-how as opposed to know-what or know-why. And this tacit economy, these tacit sector jobs, that's the growth sector of the economy. It's about 40% of the labor force now, and about 70% of the jobs that have been created since 1998. These are the jobs we need to be preparing Minnesotans to fill in the future if we're going to continue our record of strong growth that we've had over the past 50 years. Now, here's another economic fact of life. Everybody's concerned about the income distribution. There were questions about the income distribution in the earlier panel. But the simple economic facts are that workers can't be paid more than the value of their marginal product. If you're paid more than the value of the good that you're producing or the service that you're providing, the firm's going to go out of business. So how do we attack from an economic point of view the problem of income distribution? What we do is we make sure that workers' talents are fully used, that they're as well prepared as possible for the global economy. And this is going to be more of a challenge than it was in the 1950s and the 1960s. Technology is changing more rapidly. We can't change the structure of the workforce as easily as we did before because the base of the workforce, the incumbent workforce, is so large. And yet there are all kinds of changes going on. So we need to begin thinking about how do we upgrade the skills of the incumbent workforce. K-12 education is important. Immediate post-secondary education is important. But the biggest part of the workforce are the people that are already working. 80% of the people that are going to be working 10 years from now are already working. If we're concerned about maximizing talents, we've got to be thinking about that group as well. So, here's the outlook for labor force over the next growth over the next few years. What you can see is that more people are retiring than entering the labor force. The natural growth rate, the number of people that enter the labor force minus the number of people retiring, beginning in 2010 begins to shrink. It drops by 12,000 between 2010 and 2020, drops by 75,000 between 2020 and 2030. There's not much room for increased participation rate. Sure, we may work a little longer, we may work a little beyond age 65 or 66, but the increased participation rate is going to be difficult. Where's the growth going to come? It's going to have to come from migration. In fact, all of the growth that we have in the workforce between 2020 and 2030 essentially comes from migration.
So they're telling you that your kids are going to have to compete against a bunch of migrants for the workforce, and that we're going to have to continue the same level of living for the retirees that we're probably not going to have. Now, the other way that we could have an increased workforce is through Musk's robots and that, which we have, and through automation, especially automation of jobs that are menial, that don't add any value, that are just managerial or a widget. I shouldn't say widget. They're not even making widgets. They're just a cog in the system type of jobs. I don't know, like the people at the Ford Center or whatever that Trump took over, that's charging people are charging $100,000 for a dinner there or whatever to speak. So some of your entertainers, some of your YouTube stars, you go down the list. Okay, if there's less people watching, and they're not doing any value added, no offense, they're just selling time and attention. But when I say value added, is there's things that actually add value to the economy, and you're producing something, you're producing stuff, right? Or like you're fixing stuff, you're transferring stuff to one form to another, like transforming a chicken into being processed into actual chicken products. So like take your chicken, you butcher it, and then, or it lays eggs and then you sell those eggs. It's being transferred from one product to another, I guess. But the services is where it'll get interesting.
And that's really the difficult component to forecast. That we have a pretty good idea of what the natural change is going to be. We even have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen to the participation rate, what proportion of adults will be in the paid workforce. But the difficult item is having a sense of what will happen to migration, because it has an interplay with what is happening here versus every other state and every other country of the world. And we characteristically have people moving here from other states, people moving from here to other states to take advantage of jobs. And that job growth becomes a major factor in both our economic growth and our population growth. That you really sort of need to have a reason to move to Minnesota. You don't get here by accident, by and large. You need to have a reason, and job is the biggest source of reason for that change. And as a result of that change, the people who move here from other states resembles the average American, and the average American is more diverse racially and ethnically than the average Minnesotan. And people move here from other countries, and the people who move here are more likely to be of different racial and ethnic and cultural language backgrounds. That as a result, Minnesota is changing, and changing already fairly dramatically. And that change is first being felt in our K-12 age populations, because it's young people who tend to move long distances and cross significant boundaries. It's young people who moved out of the rural areas to the center, to the cities, and built this wonderful place we call the Twin Cities. That next movement of young people is coming from other states and other countries, and we have people moving here from over 160 different countries to Minnesota, and from virtually every state. Minnesota is undergoing change, and the current educational achievement levels for the children of these people that are migrating raises some concerns and some cautions. Now, if we look at our K-12 age, our public school enrollments in Minnesota, what we find is that the majority white students are declining and declining fairly sharply. This was fully anticipated. This is not a surprise. We've known that this would happen, that number is dropping.
But it's a conspiracy, they tell us. It's a conspiracy. The Caligari plan. I'm sorry, I just had to add that.
Dropping sharply. But the overall enrollment is dropping at much less because what we are seeing is dramatic changes in the students of color in all of our schools. And the change is occurring first in our school districts. The concern begins to be raised when we look at school achievement. Now, there's many ways that you can look at school achievement and different ways you can calculate graduation rates and test scores and things like that. I would argue that virtually every one of those methods shows almost exactly the same result, that there are large differences by race and ethnicity, also by other factors such as gender and cultural background and things like that. There are large differences in the achievement levels of young people. It will be difficult to build a world-class, world-competitive workforce that will keep our top corporations here in Minnesota. It will be difficult to build that on the backs of a high school graduation rates in the neighborhood of 60%. That these are, while Minnesota has one of the highest graduation rates in the nation, much of the reason why we have one of the highest graduation rates in the nation is that our student body right now is not very diverse. It is becoming rapidly more diverse. And our difference from the rest of the country is changing. And our prosperity, as we pointed out, has been historically based on a highly productive workforce and a workforce that is highly educated and highly trained. And what we're seeing is that younger people in the workforce are less likely to have completed high school, whether they grew up here or came in from another state or another country. They are less likely to have completed high school than older members of the workforce, many of whom are thinking about retiring. Think about a baseball example. If you're playing baseball and you're a batter and you hit the ball and don't get to first base, you are out. If you don't graduate from high school, you will be relegated to competing with the lowest wage, lowest benefit workers of the world.
A lot of those is exactly who they're trying to bring in through the migration and that. Okay, so it gets real interesting because some of that effort they could have focused on Americans, especially Americans that traditionally haven't performed as well in certain groups and haven't had those resources. It's a lot easier to get them up to par than it is bringing in people from other countries, paying all that money, plus then having to get them up to par.
We have an increasingly global economy. We do not want our children competing there. We do not want our economy competing there. We want our economy to be competing at the highest level of productivity in the world.
Let me remind you of something that I told you a little bit earlier, and that was that we now have more than 90% of the workforce has a high school education. Then I want you to go back and look at the chart just before the one that's on the screen now. It shows what the majority white high school graduation rate is. It's less than 90%. We're not even replacing our workforce with the majority white population, let alone with the minority population. We keep coming back to it, but productivity is so important here that I want to give you a quick example to talk about here. And let's just think about a simple firm, a bakery. And you can have productivity occur because people working in the bakery get more familiar with their job, so they're able to do the job more skillfully. You can have productivity occur because the bakery buys bigger mixers, they buy bigger ovens, and so they can produce more product that way. Capital investment. And you can have productivity occur because somewhere a new recipe for bread is developed, and it takes 2 minutes or 3 minutes less to prepare that recipe than it would otherwise. All of those are ways that you can have productivity. You can have productivity by investing in human capital. You can increase productivity by investing in physical capital. And you can have an increase in productivity by investing in research and development, so you promote technological change. Now, some of you may have seen a report in the paper on Saturday on the front page of the business page, which I think deserved more visibility than it got. It was really disturbing. It talks about how Minnesota's investment in research and development has changed over the past couple of decades. And what you see is that the state is not investing, not state government, but the state of Minnesota is not investing in research and development anywhere near the way that we should. If you look at total academic R&D spending, in 1972 we ranked 19th. Now we rank 26th. Well, you can say, well, that's not too bad. There are big states and so on like that. California wouldn't expect that we'd invest the same amount as California. We're kind of in the middle of the pack and so on like that. It's not bad. If you look at what's happening by academic R&D investment per capita, or academic R&D investment per dollar of GSP, the results are pretty frightening. So that's something else we need to be thinking about as we're going out trying to promote productivity. Still, though, Tom and I would both argue, well, let's see here, that workforce development is really going to be the key to Minnesota's economic future. We're not going to have an increase in the number of workers that's going to just propel the economy. In fact, we're going to have more dependence than we are going to have.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there for a second because I want to show you guys a couple of things. We're going to switch over to this tab. So this is a map of the global birth rate, okay? And the countries that are below 2.1 are declining. This is how much of the world is a declining birth rate. That's most of the world, including most of South America, okay, Mexico, United States, Canada, most of Europe, Russia, India. You go down the list there. There's some that have less than one birth per woman, I guess. And so for each 2 people, you need 2.1 to replace them. That 0.1 is going to die possibly naturally before they reach the age of being able to reproduce, right? And this is just math. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to offend anybody on like language here. So these are the countries that have between 2 and 3 births, and that's part of Central America. Venezuela, Bolivia, Paraguay, Suriname. There's a couple of them there. It's very little of South America, though. And then you have a couple places in Asia, Malaysia, in southeastern Asia. Southeastern Asia, and then a couple places in Africa. And it's mainly northern Africa, over to like Saudi Arabia and that. And then you go from 3 above 3. There's a tiny bit in Pakistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. And then you go up from there, and it is basically Africa. Afghanistan's pretty much the only exception. So the places that will be having enough kids is pretty much Africa and some of the places in Asia. The problem is, though, if you guys haven't actually done any research on demographics, I've actually been looking into demographics for quite a while, and it gets interesting. Okay, so there's a group, and these guys put this out a while ago. Okay, which is Center for International Governance and Innovation. And they put out this empty planet preparing for the global population decline. And it's a video that they have on YouTube, and you can also go to their YouTube. I'll show that right here. Okay, they have one there, but you can also go to their website, and I will put links in the comments to these. On X, I will also put the link on X, so you guys can go and look these up sometime. But it gets very interesting because what they found is that as people access technology, that birth rate declines precipitously, whether or not they are in a third world country. Okay, access to technology, and then also the birth control stuff. There's been a lot of forced sterilizations with the USAID stuff. And it's just a fact if you look into their programs. And so it gets interesting because, yeah, if the entire world ends up going into a negative birth rate cycle, how are we going to be able to take care of the elderly? That is something we do need to look at, because right here, this is one of their slides that they had, and it talks about this tax base being affected as these baby boomers retire. They're more fiscally conservative and it's less of a tax base. More spending on Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, and it even shows you right here how much of a tax change that is. Okay, on average for people making that income. So the higher the income, the more that tax base is going to be eroded. But these people are still going to expect the same services provided rather than less services. The cost of those services has also exponentially gone up because of the health care. So something that they did not account for back when they made this, okay? Especially with the 2008 housing bubble stuff that happened. There's a lot of value that was wiped out there.
Have workers. What we have to be concerned about is we have to be concerned about the quality of the workforce. We have to be concerned about the quality of the new workers, the people that are entering the workforce for the first time. We have to be sure that we're going to allow them to make full use of their talents as we go on. But we also have to be concerned about the incumbent workforce. Now, I can tell a lot of you, the people that are fiscally astute here, you're going to say, wait a minute, this is going to cost money. And you're right, it is going to cost money. But the good news is that Minnesota's economy is going to grow. And over the next 10 years, the amount of growth that we're likely to see in the Minnesota economy may surprise you. It actually surprised me when I first did this. What we know is that if things go like we expect, that real, and when economists talk about real, what they mean is inflation adjusted, real per capita personal income is likely to grow about 25% over the next decade. Now think about it for a minute. What does that mean? Well, what it means is we're going to be able to buy 25% more stuff. And I don't know about you, but I don't have room for 25% more stuff in my garage. Yeah. Yeah, so some entrepreneur there says, yeah, here's a business opportunity. Okay. What it means is for a person that's working a normal 8-hour day, it's like every day at the end of your term, you get a 2-hour bonus. It's really amazing. And if you look at it, it happened last decade too. This isn't something that's unusual. We had that kind of growth in the last decade as well. Productivity, that's what's going on. That's what drove this. Here are some more numbers real quickly. Real per capita disposable income after tax income expected to grow by about $7,500 by 2016. Household wealth forecast to grow by 60%. Now that's a nominal number. That's not adjusting for inflation, but with my portfolio, I'll take 60% growth, nominal or real, either one. It's inflation adjusted. Some medical costs are already included, the medical costs that are consistent with the levels of care that we already are consuming. And Minnesota could do better. We've done better than the national economy over the last 50 years. We could do better in the next decade. This is the real story. This is the other side of the productivity story. We as a society, we as a state, are going to have the resources to do whatever we want to do over the next decade. Now, it's not that we won't have to make choices. We're going to have to make choices, but the choices that we have to make aren't what are we going to do without in order to maintain this minimal level. It's what are we going to do in addition to what we're already doing. And here, there are a lot of choices we can make. We can choose to consume that money. We can choose to invest it. We can choose to invest it in infrastructure. We can choose to invest it in human capital. We can choose to invest it in research and development. It's our choice. It's our choice. What will we do? And here demographics come into play again.
And we've shown this graph before, but I'm going to add one more line. Before we look just at the 65 and older and the 18 to 24-year-old age, and I'm going to add the school age, the K-12 age population on that. And what we see is that by 2020, this has already been mentioned, but by 2020, the 65 and older line passes the K-12 age population, both in Minnesota and the United States. Again, Minnesota in this is almost exactly the national average. And while you may think of this as three components of our population, you can also think of this as the three largest components of state government budget. Higher education, K-12 education, and social and health care for an aging population. That these are large components of state government budget, and some of it is on autopilot. Some of this, maybe a big chunk of it, an increasing chunk of it, is on autopilot, and these budget priorities will change unless we make conscious decisions to do otherwise. That the aging of society will impact both our public and private spending. That healthcare costs are going to increase. They will certainly increase. That's not really a question. The question is how much. That there will be shifts in government priorities to issues of aging and health, and that's almost certain to occur. That we also have expected changes in voter attitudes. Demographers and economists and political scientists have been talking about older voters being more fiscally conservative for at least the last 35 years that I'm aware of. This is not a new issue, but we are beginning to see some of the full implications of some of the changes, and our state tax base will certainly be impacted as more and more people reach retirement age. While the issues that we've laid out here can be challenging, we've already pointed out that for every challenge there are also wonderful opportunities. If you have too much stuff for your garage, build more garages. That's a great business opportunity. remember, Minnesota is starting from a position of strength. We are one of the most successful places in the country. We are a fortunate place. We have choices. We have choices that many other states do not have at this time. The real issue is not whether or not we have the choices. The real issue is what do we choose to do.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and go over to some other charts. So this one right here is this year's. So we'll go ahead and finish up that lecture in just a minute, because there is one more part of that lecture. But right here is this year's presentation by Susan Brower, who's the state demographer currently. So in 2023, there was 900, basically almost 1 million school-age children, 960,700. It shows the total population under 18, and these are just data points. So it shows the concentration. Most of it's around the Twin Cities area. So one of the things that the GOP is going to need to look at is the people in this area, and this area, and this area are going to be declining. You have a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit Mankato. That's Mankato. That's Rochester. You have a few other ones, right? But you're going to have to look at if the House gets redistricted because of the population decline. You're going to want to look at that, right? And so it's supposed to decline by 5% over the next 15 years for the school-age population. If the immigration stuff does happen like Trump is doing, then the problem is that's going to decline even more precipitously. You don't need to have more funding for the teachers and more teachers if it's going to be declining. We can fund it at what it is currently, but there's no reason why we should be funding it at previous rates, because the increase from here, that's when we started adding the Somali immigration. Okay, it was rather flat since the 70s. Before that, 50 to 70, that was going up because there was a baby boom, right? And then it was flat, and then all of a sudden we added the Somalis and the other immigrants, knowing that we would have to add them to our force. And truthfully, there was some out migration in here too. And we added the Hmong right here as well to compensate for some of that. And the decline in the 80s, there's a lot of people that did flee the state. And so we did have immigration between other places in here as well to compensate for that. Okay. But it showed already that the natural birth rates and that it wasn't at the replacement rate. Okay. So this is mainly due to immigration and immigration births. So right here, it shows how much it'll decline. Okay. Northwestern Minnesota up here by 10 to 15% almost. Okay. Number 2 right here is between 5 in 0 and 5%. Okay, North Central is number 3 is the arrowhead right here. That's going to lose as well, right? And then 4 is West Central. You're going to have a little bit of an uptick, supposedly. That's going to be all from immigration, because there's not as many kids out there. North Central, right here, again, that's going to be from immigration. Southwest Central, which is 6E, right here, is going to decline. 6W, which is right here, is going to increase a little bit. And again, that's going to be from immigration. 7E, right here, that's the part mostly going to be around the 7-county metro. It's mainly going to be from immigration. 7W, right here, Central. This is a rural-plex going up to St. Cloud and that, and I can show you on the map that they showed earlier. Their goal is to depopulate rural Minnesota to have their mega city and their sustainable growth corridor. They talk about it in other programs and manuals, but this is, I mean, it's literally what it is. Okay. And you can go look at their 2060 projections and you'll see it in their 2060 projections on exactly how they want to do it. Okay. This is Tom and Tom from the audio that we're listening to. So they basically want this area right here, right? And it's going to be an area going up to Fargo and along the train lines and that. So that's going to be a transportation corridor, and then going down through Blue Earth and then out this way and then up to Duluth. But the transportation corridors are what they want to end up being higher density. So they're trying to have a higher density housing at a higher cost. The cost of living out here is a lot cheaper as far as the cost of a house, and that for the most part, I mean, Mankato's is a couple of outliers, right? But for the most part, you can get a place cheaper in a rural area than you can in the city. Now that the rate of ratio to pay is different there, but it does exist. So it shows you that the changes they're going to have, right? So this is the children, and that is an inverted pyramid. You look at that, right? And it's going to keep on declining. This is the average numeric change. Okay. These ones are going to grow. These ones are not. Okay. So this is, but for the population of 5 to 17 years old. So as you see, there's not enough 5 to 17-year-olds being born in these green areas, right? In the blue areas, there is. But the problem is in those blue areas, the ratio, again, of people isn't really going to support that long term. They're going to end up moving away and all that jazz. Because there's going to be a bunch of old people like out here, right? St. Cloud is a little bit different. And some of these are closer to the city, maybe a little bit different. But if the numeric change, that means that they're losing. This is 309 is the most that got added. Okay, 100 to 309. I'm not sure if that's percent or just total. Yeah, the annual gains is 309 for the school age kids. So if these are losing school age kids, the funding needs to reflect that, but it doesn't. There needs to be smaller class sizes or condense some of the schools down, right? And here's a percent change. So I'm just saying these are things we need to look at. Okay. This is the population added. So you look at Wayzata, St. Cloud, Rosemount, Apple Valley, Eagan, South Washington County, Anoka, Hennepin, Elk River, Moorhead, right? And I guarantee you, if you look at the percentages, it's going to be a higher ratio of immigrants, right? Mounds View, Spring Lake Park, Osseo maybe not. It may be an outlier, but now Mankato, definitely. You know, you can go ahead and look at it. These are the population decline in school age kids. Then, okay, St. Paul, Eden Prairie. Then you can go down the list there, right? And here's the makeup, right? And this is going to drop off precipitously. And so the other thing you're going to have is these intergroup arguments too, because everything's been blamed on this group down here. So as this group shrinks, they're going to have to start blaming each other for other things. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but once this gets below 50% and these again increase, you're going to have a harder time saying, oh, it's all Whitey's fault if you now make up a greater percentage. And obviously, we're going to need to adapt some of our materials to reflect some of this too. But should we sacrifice this big group for these group? No, we should do both. We can do both, right? Yeah, it gets interesting. So the Somali rate is almost at the same rate as African American. And if you add those two together, it's at 53, so pretty close. But it just says other right here, not specified. Yeah. So here's the percentage or U.S. households. It's the majority, right? And it's almost 200,000 with only one parent present. There's 135,000 that are foreign. Our parents are foreign born, right? So at least one parent foreign born is 73,000. So between those two, that's 200,000 of those have at least one parent that is foreign born. Okay, that's 20%. And they highlighted that there. Okay. 20% compared to 25% nationally. Nearly 1 in 5 speak a language at home other than English. Now, they also did a schematic where they pay more for special needs, LGBTQIA, and ESL students. So they actually pay the schools more for those students, especially if they are in special needs and all that jazz, right? So concentrated areas of poverty for kids, if you zoom in on this, so you have obviously some parts of the cities, but look at outstate, okay? And that's going to probably get worse with the older people not able to buy as much in those shrinking economies in those rural areas. At some point, it's going to collapse, and we have seen here in Minnesota the reduction of police departments, especially in rural Minnesota, where they're giving up their police department because they can no longer afford to keep that going. They've been handing it over to the sheriff's department to run the county. So we're going to go ahead and hop back into the audio. So I'm going to hit play and I'm going to be quiet. Looks like the audio dropped off. Give me 1 second. I'm going to have to figure that out again. Looks like the audio dropped off. Give me 1 second. I'm going to have to figure that out again. Looks like the audio dropped off. Give me 1 second. I'm going to figure that out again. Okay. So, give me 1 second here. It looks like I might have to add a media share screen. Just seeing if the leg works. Okay, it didn't work. They're just going over the conclusions. I'm going to stop sharing that screen real quick. Go back to the main. Okay. So I think you guys get the gist of it with the demographics there. I'm going to see if there we go. Let's I guess it cuts off the audio sometimes when you switch between them. So let's see if that will work.
In any speech, and that is, and in conclusion. Let's review what we've told you. What we've told you is that Minnesota has been very successful. But we are in a period of rapid and critical change, and demographic forces are going to shape our future for the next quarter century. How we respond to those demographic forces is going to be the key. One of the demographic forces is going to be the retirement of the baby boom. But another one that doesn't get as much attention is going to be the slow labor force growth that we'll see as the 18 to 24-year-olds don't grow as fast. Demand for public services will reflect the trends in age structure, and these economic and demographic shifts will shift budget priorities. The real question, coming back to something we talked about earlier, we look back on the decisions that people made 50-plus years ago. You can say thanks, that you did a really good job. And the real question is, how will Minnesotans 50-plus years from now view our generation's stewardship? Thank you.
We will take some questions for Tom and Tom being collected right now. All right, the first one to make it to the podium here. Boy, this is a smart group. Will the increase in competition for workers create inflationary pressures and therefore higher interest rates and lower economic growth?
The answer is no, because it's back to one of those economic facts of life that we put on the board, which is that You can't pay workers more than the value of their marginal product. And so as long as you're paying workers the value of their marginal product, it's not going to create inflationary pressures in there at all. I mean, that's why you take beyond.
Just remember that since then, we've also had, I don't know, the unions pushing for wages that are outside necessarily the value that they're creating. That's part of the reason why you see some of these shops closing down once they get unionized in that. Now, they also have the expectation of increased output, which isn't necessarily fair. I mean, like, right, they're expecting more of us per hour or whatever to make up for that. So, I mean, like, there is a balance there, but that's how they're making it up, is by expecting people to work more, longer, harder for the same stuff that used to be given for a lot easier work. And no offense to the baby boomer generation, but it was. That's just the data, man. A lot has been automated, and that's what automation does add to that as well. So there's a double-edged sword with the automation portion.
The first week of class so that Tom was.
Well, there's one.
Should we have more vacations and flex time? I'm all in favor of that. I'm all in favor of that for me, but I'm also all in favor of that because of this. The challenge that we're going to have is how do we increase the number of workers that we have in the economy. And as we're looking to keep people in the workforce, we're going to have to end up coming up with innovative solutions. And those innovative solutions, the firms that are able to come up with the innovative solutions to maintain the human capital that they have in their workforce, those are the firms that are going to be successful. So the answer to that is yes, that's something that we're going to have to be thinking about. That's something that we should be thinking about not just for business firms, but it's also going to be a problem for state government. Tom, I think you have something to say about the retirement of the workforce in state government?
Yeah, and I'll give you this. I'll give you that question to answer, and I'll talk about retirement. Will people need to retire later? Will older people need to pay for their own health care soon? Government can't afford it. Oh, that's a small question. There is a group called the Employment Benefit Research Institute, EBRI, which you can get online, Google it, that does an annual survey of people's retirement intentions. And one of the questions that they ask about, well, how well have you financially prepared and things like that. And one of the questions they asked was people preparing to retire, when do you expect to retire? And most American workers expect to retire at age 65 or later. And then they asked people who actually did retire just recently. And most of them retired around 62 to 63. Why do we have this disconnect? Well, they asked them, well, why did you retire earlier than you intended to? And the biggest reasons were health, disability, lost a job, things that were outside, or at least the people believed were outside of their control. So it may be possible to increase the retirement age. And even the question of what do we mean by retirement, because, people retire, collect a pension from one place, go to work someplace else. It's all an extremely complex subject, but there's many definitions that I can show you, but they all tend to come together around age 62 to age 63. The other question has to do with the distribution of income and wealth, and the General Accounting Office, GAO, of the federal government released a study this last summer, and based upon 2004 data. And as a result of that survey, this is for people in workers who are age 55 and older, basically people approaching retirement. They looked at the total wealth accumulation. 50%, half of the people controlled less than 3% of the wealth in that group. And it wasn't totally related to income. It has to do with a number of factors that people can't always control. Things like, does your employer have a defined benefit plan or something like that? And it also has to do with how much you've been saving over a long period of time. It's really hard to start that 2 or 3 years before your retirement and try to save enough to be able to retire on. So there are very serious concerns about how this is going to go forward in the future, and healthcare costs are rising, and there are grave concerns over people's access to healthcare. Again, Minnesota has the highest level of health insurance coverage, the highest level of health access and outcome of any state in the nation. Primarily that is due to the fact that our employers primarily it is an employment-based insurance function. Minnesota ranks, I believe it's number 2 in the nation in the proportion of people with employment-based health insurance. That's where Minnesota is rather exceptional.
One of the questions that came up says, does your presentation tell us we need to attract more immigrants? And the answer is pretty clear. If you remember that graph that we had up there, if we don't get more immigrants, and here when we're talking about immigrants, we're talking about people from other states as well as other countries. If we don't get more immigrants, we're not going to have any increase in the labor force in 2020. We're going to be stagnant. And that's going to create problems. Firms are going to leave Minnesota because they can't find the workers. And that's going to be a problem for us. So the answer is yes, we need to attract more immigrants. Now, should they come from foreign countries? Should they come from other states? They're going to come. Now, Mr. Sinkler, in the first section, answered the question. He said he was a realist. And I found his answer really refreshing. He said 2 things. One is immigrants are going to come. And 2, the important thing that we're going to have to be able to do is make sure that they are able to compete at a high level in the workforce. I mean, most of you know this, but Minnesota's workforce has a national reputation as being a productive, well-educated, good, strong workforce. There's a reason why manufacturing employment in Minnesota has grown over the last few decades and it's shrunk nationally. And that is because the Minnesota worker has a strong brand identification. The Minnesota worker is well known for his productivity. What we have to be concerned about is if we have a large number of immigrants coming to the state, people coming not from Iowa and North Dakota and South Dakota and Wisconsin, but from Alabama and Illinois and California and from foreign countries, whether we will be able to maintain that same brand identification for the Minnesota worker. Because if we don't maintain that brand identification, we are at the end of the road in terms of the transportation network. And it's going to be increasingly difficult for us to attract new jobs to the state. So that's an important thing.
And just on that last point, it does appear that we are beginning to show signs of slipping in that preparation and that brand identification, which is wonderful. I mean, I remember when I first came to Minnesota, people when everybody else in the United States was lusting after the German example, I remember people coming from Germany wondering how we did it so well. Yeah, and so that's something that we need to be aware of. We can't let these things slip through our fingers.
Well, let's thank Tom and Tom. Okay, a couple quick announcements here.
Then they go over some housekeeping items for their conference about lunch and stuff like that. Okay, but this right here is the 2024 analysis that was put together of the migration and all that jazz. So we're just going to go over a couple of the images on here. So I'm going to turn off my camera and focus on the if I drop everything down, the problem is I can't get the audio back sometimes with the sharing. So okay. For the past 20 years, we've consistently lost residents on net to other states. Okay. And it moderated in 2023. Okay. The net outflow of people it talks about, and 30% of the outflow are between 15 to 29. Okay. And a lot of that is due to college in that. Thing of it is, though, is as we add those immigrants to those college slots, it makes it harder for our natural American citizens to compete and get into those colleges. And so where do they go? They go places other than Minnesota. Especially for, like, I know some gals that were going to school for nursing school, dental school, stuff like that, that had 4.0s that couldn't get in Minnesota. So they're just going to go somewhere else. I know people that were accepted into MD-MPA programs that went into other states. And so, yeah, you're going to have to look at that, right? Because if you're saying you don't want them here, then someplace will want them. Migration among Minnesota's middle age and later age is pretty much flat, right? And then there's out migration losses to other states that are more friendly for retirees. Okay. 100,000 people into and out of the state per year. So it shows that there's no single explanation on why the losses happen, right? Well, yeah, because the baby's not being born. Enough babies. There we go. Okay. You have to have more people coming in than people dying, or babies being born than people dying. Okay. So they want to have more people come in. Okay. So it talks about the data here, the growing role of migration. Okay. The key thing is right here. In 1957, that was the height of the natural growth. Okay. They lost only 9,300 to migration, whereas the numbers down to 13,800 people in 2023 were added because of natural growth, whereas it was 9,000 for net migration. So anyway, here's the data for population change. So total net migration, birth rate change, and total population change. And so that gets interesting, right? The natural birth rates are on the decline. Over the next 20 years, it'll wane. and it'll be natural decline. We've already hit that. So this, I don't know where this demographer is getting her numbers from, because immigration is the only way we've been able to grow. And even Tom and Tom were talking about that. So some of these numbers I think are off. And that's just based on Tom and Tom's data. I don't know where this lady's getting her data from. Because I've shown you Tom and Tom's data. Their data is right over here, and we've gone over it. But we shall see here. Changes in net migration. So they've gone down, right? International migration. There we go. So there's the domestic net migration. So we did add some domestic in the 90s, but we added a lot of international. Oh, I should say a lot. Okay. But it's kept on going up for the international, right? And we've lost net migration. So from 2000 to 2020, we've kept on adding immigrants in order to be able to maintain even. And this shows pretty much the same. And given the numbers since the early 2000s, we've added about 400,000 people to Minnesota, which is about the same population as Minneapolis and St. Paul. So you guys can go through this stuff. I'll go ahead and throw up the links, and you guys can go and look it up from there. But I mean, that's all I'm trying to show is that, hey, look, we've not necessarily done the best job of taking care of Minnesotans. Okay, because what they've done is they've decided to take care of migrants over Minnesotans and not encourage Minnesotans to have more kids. Okay, that's just a fact of the matter. And that includes North Minneapolis, right? That includes the blacks that moved up here from Chicago in the 80s. They had you competing against the Somalis they were starting to bring in, and the Hmong that were they brought in, and then the illegal immigrants too. And that's sort of been like shown. Okay, it's all data. These are all data points. Tom and Tom were awesome demographers, but this was a plan. They had a plan. They came up with it and they executed it. So that's sort of just, what happened. But you guys are competing against those same immigrants. And some of those immigrants had way more services than the natural American citizens, right? That the reading programs or whatever else, they get more money for that if it's an English learner. And you go down the list. I think we can do better than what we have been doing. And the other thing is the university system is way overhead. It has way too much, too many administrators and all that jazz. And the replication of those across as many colleges as we have. Minnesota has quite a few colleges. We don't need that many. Okay. The only reason why they're able to keep going is through the grants from foreign countries and whatever else, and bringing those people here. As soon as those stop, that Russian roulette sort of is, is going to hit. That, and if you look at the top state paid employees, those that make over 400 to 500,000 a year, those that make more than the governor, almost all Minnesota State college employees. So there's only so long you can keep on going on with that. And that racket's about to be up soon. So we need to look at that and not just keep on funding the same problem and not scale it, not force the scaling. Okay. Like I went to school for law enforcement at MNSU, Mankato. Okay. This shirt right here is from Okay. Well, the only reason I went to school is because I had my VA benefits left, and it's either use it or lose it. Um, but you're not going to need a law enforcement program there, and in 5 other colleges in Minnesota. So maybe 2 colleges that get that program, right? And then you choose which colleges get what programs and make sure it's sustainable still. But you also need to be tapping Minnesotans, otherwise you're going to be shipping them out of state. And you ship Minnesotans out of state while subsidizing foreigners, you're going to have a lot of issues. And the other side of that is some of the DEI policies that were for applications were not necessarily good for everybody. Because if they're not able to function at that college level and they're going to fail out, you're encouraging them to get in, apply, be accepted, get those loans knowing they're going to fail out. Okay. We need to get students up to the level to be able to participate in college at that college level with those expectations. My teachers were interesting. I had some great teachers though, but some of them even had just parents of students calling because my kid didn't get a good enough grade, and people couldn't complete simple grammar and stuff for like writing police reports and that. And I'm not talking about complex grammar here, but like, explaining what you did in a police report, arrived on scene at this time, encountered this and that, you know what I mean? And just doing, it's a lot like the military writing, right? So at 1800 hours, officer so-and-so arrived with officer so-and-so at this location. We did, you know what I mean? All that jazz. Well, if you can't write proper English and that, and you can't get up on the stand and be able to articulate yourself on what happened and have it documented as such, because if you don't document it never happened, there's going to be a lot of issues. And there's a lot of cops that do have a lot of issues with a lot of their reports, and it's going to get worse if we're not getting people up to those levels. That's the same thing with, education. You go down the list, is that we've done a lot of these feel good things that may or may not have poor outcomes, right? So rather than getting the people up to the level for entering the workforce, right, they're just graduating them whether or not they can read. Then these people go into the workforce and can't read, so that employers having to spend the money to bring them from there to there. Well, why would I spend when I was doing HR and safety for the hydrovac company, for each new hire, it was a minimum of $2,000 that we spent whether or not they made it past their 90-day mark. That was the average of what it took to get somebody up to that 90-day mark. Okay. And more than half of people didn't make it. Out of 10 applicants, I was expecting to have 2 make it past that 90-day mark. That's a lot of money to spend. Okay. So you're spending an average of $20,000 per 1 or 2 employees actually hired. And then if your employees are remedial at best, you're spending another $5,000 to $10,000 trying to get them up to even the basic competency level. Now it's different per industry, but let's just say if you're at let's even a fast food restaurant, how many orders can you take an hour? How many burgers can you make an hour, right? If they can't understand basic safety or like how to flip a burger or assemble a burger because they've never done it before, and also if your work ethic isn't there, right? So let's say they're only producing, let's say in a 15-minute period, 4 burgers, where the average would be that you need to make money is at 8 burgers. You're losing money on that employee. At some point, you're going to have to replace them, and you're going to probably replace them with robots, which we see happening in today's world or economy. Okay, Musk has talked about it. My father-in-law is over visiting a place overseas, and they had this robot that would even come up to you in the grocery store. It has a little presentation of items on there, try to get you to buy it. Almost like the sample ladies, right? And some places are going to the same thing for your waiters and waitresses, and you go down the list. So be careful, because your expectation of these wages and stuff if you're not putting out the work product, eventually it's going to be cheaper to replace you with those mechanized means or automated means, and then you're out of a job, man. So how long are we going to keep on going like that too? How much automation are we going to have? And where are we going to see society really collapse? Because you also have the wealth transfer, but if by the time that they die, the baby boomer generation has eaten up all that wealth, there is no wealth to transfer. There's only debt to transfer. The average person has on their mortgages on their house has more than one mortgage. They've actually overextended themselves on that on the value of their home. Because a lot of them took out a second mortgage or a value-added mortgage after that when the prices went up. Well, the prices went up so fast, they're starting to come back down. You're going to see them come back down and correct hardcore because these homes were valued. I mean, in 2019, when I sold my home in Yuma, Arizona, it was valued at about $175. That same home a year later would have been selling for almost $300. Okay, so it almost doubled in value in a year. There's only so long that that's going to be able to happen before the market corrects. The market is going to correct, and so when that market does correct and you have to sell a home, then for let's say $200,000 and you have a $100,000 loan that is on top of your mortgage, and so now let's say you had it partly paid off, but so now let's say you have $200,000 that you owe, and you're only able to sell it for $200,000. You're not making anything. Well, if you end up having that, let's say your home was valued at $500,000, and you went ahead and took out some money to get you to the pandemic and do whatever else, and well, let's just say you owe $300,000. Now you're at a $100,000 loss. And we're already starting to see that in the commercial real estate market in Minnesota. So these are things that will be happening and will need to be addressed. And most of the time, the legislator puts their head in the sand and just keeps on with their pet projects. These are things that you're going to need to look at. And these are, like the guys I was had playing earlier, it was Tom and Tom, the state demographers, Gillespie, I believe, and Stinson from the 2007 Minnesota conference. So then next week, we're going to get into a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and share this again. So next week, we're going to get into the audio of the changing role of the state legislator. And then technology in the global economy. I'm not sure we're going to do the technology in the global economy. There is one, though, that I'm going to want to do from the 2008 session. For sure. Most of the audio on this one is not there. I believe this is the one. It should have the Arnie Carlson and those guys on here. Let me see. Yeah, it may have been the 2007 one. Okay, let me just double check here. Yeah, the presenters right here. There we go. So the changing role of the state legislator. And they talk about this, okay? One of these guys, I think is Arnie. Is either Arnie or wait, no, Martin Sabo. I think he's the one that was from Minneapolis. Let me see. So the 5th district. Okay, let's see where the 5th district is. Yeah, it's Hennepin in that. Yep. So he actually talks about the stuff about. Oh, sorry, I didn't screen share that. I thought I did. Anyway, let me get that screen shared. Boop. There we go. So from the conference. So this is the part that we went over today. Is this stuff up here? right here, the Chinerola state legislator, Martin Sabo and them, they talk about like, hey, you actually got to go into Minneapolis to get the votes from Minneapolis because you got to actually like talk to the people. So these are things that Rev Tim has said, that Chaz has said. Like, it's not crazy stuff, man. Like, these guys knew it. And we also have to improve the things for our native residential American population. So, I mean, like, the things I'm saying aren't like crazy. The demographers have talked about it. Study demography a little bit, man. Please look up the different things like that. Know how the economy works. How does an economy grow? What would happen if certain things happen, like the economy shrinks, right? We have a chance right now to scale Minnesota's economy. So the overproduction with the agriculture, a lot of that's been subsidized by the USDA, and that a lot of the products that we make are for consumption outside of America or into the poisons that RFK talks about with ADM. And you go down the list where they basically take the product and break it into different things like soy meal or corn meal, and then the high fructose corn syrup, and you go down the list, all that type of thing, right? Or for like biofuels. So if we're going to be actually producing food for Americans and making it cheaper for them, we can do that. And we can actually do that at scale, producing less, selling it locally for a better price, at least in season, and make more money doing it because we're not having to do it at a large scale. So there is a way to do that. And Minnesota actually does have one of the most butchers per capita in the United States. And those are only small scale butchers that I'm talking about. Yes, we have the big plants. We have over 200 custom process plants. Some of those are USDA plants. You can call up your local butcher and probably find a farmer that is selling something at price, and either get a state E2 where it's you're able to buy it like that, custom processed. You can't resell it, right? The state E2 you can for the state, and then USDA would be outside the state. You can, but you don't even have to get it like that. You just get them custom processed for yourself, and then like it's a little bit more because the prices of everything have gone up, right? One of the ladies I get it from is up to, I think, 3.25 or 24 cents per pound hanging weight for the beef, and it goes up for different things, right, for the animals. But and then just realize, if you're getting it from the local butcher, that there is a difference between hanging weight, live weight, and your end weight. Okay, because a lot of people, when they're first getting into it, have issues. Your live weight, you're going to get about between, I believe it's, you're going to lose, I'm trying to think. So for a 1,200 pound live animal, that's going to end up yielding your quarters at less than that. Your quarters are going to be about 275, right? Maybe a little bit less than that. So you lose just about 30%, 40%. And that's your skin, your bones, and that, or skin and guts and that. And then from the hanging weight, that's your meat that's hanging. You're going to lose, I think it's 20 to 30%. There's whole schematics that they have online about it. And you can, if you have any questions, ask the butcher how much their waste is normally. But just realize that the bones, unless you want the bones back, and you can have the bones back if you want to process the bones. And if you want to cut it up yourself, that's even easier. You can get it hanging by the half or quarter. But the quarter is a little bit harder to get it hanging by, but you can literally get the whole half and then butcher it yourself, break it up yourself, or get people to. And then you basically have the kill fee and then your hanging weight fee. But if for the processing, each time it's handled, you're going to pay a little bit more. So it's going from everything in the ground that's different than having it cut up. So as you have more cuts or specialty cuts, you're probably going to have a little bit more cost. If you get that ground in like summer sausage, you're handling it twice, that type of thing, especially if they go into some of the specialty sausages, you're adding other things to it. So the price varies. But back when I was doing it, it ended up being like between $5 and $6 a pound. I now end out the door is between probably 6 to 8. And I can get the exact numbers on that for you. Actually, you know what? Next time I'm on, I will have those numbers for you. But thanks for watching. I really appreciate everybody. I'm just gonna go double check the chat and see if anybody has anything. And it doesn't look like anybody does. So we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. But before we do that, I just wanted to show you. This is Ashton Forbes, okay? He's the one that has done a lot of research on the MH370. And I suggest looking him up on YouTube, on X, on all the platforms. But the song that I got given to play was by somebody that really follows him, and that's what it was about his stuff. So we're going to go ahead and play that song as the outro. Thank you very much. Be blessed and have a good week. And I'm sorry that the audio again had issues again this week. We will try to get that fixed. I'm going to try to see if I can get somebody to help me switch screens and that and pause things and whatever else. Chaz, unfortunately, was not able to be on here today because he wasn't feeling the best and had some stuff going on. So everybody, please hopefully pray or send good vibes, whatever you want to say, for him. So hopefully he gets to feeling better. But you guys all have a good night.
Engine lighter up and ready to help it soar. Flight 370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur. Mayday, mayday, dangerous lithium ion battery fire. 239 lives and risk situation so dire. Lost contact with this Boeing commercial airplane. Faulty satellite data being the weak link in this chain. 20 superconductor scientists on this flight. Does that have anything to do with it? It just might. 1, 2, 3, plasma orb coming out of nowhere. It's a 777 smoke falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 orbs with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. Where did it go? What's the notion? Which island? Which ocean? It did it crash here on land. 4 out west for the sleight of hand. For 4 days the passengers' phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found impossibly in the wrong ocean. Dark energy, ether, cold fusion, 0-point energy. Not solid, liquid, or gas. Plasma is the key. A paradigm shift in our technology. An unlimited reservoir of energy. Floating through the air round and round as we stand helpless on the ground. Orbs of light defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblower dying or getting disappeared. Heads of industry saying nothing to see here. Isn't that just a little weird? By humans this was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's a 777 smoke falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 orbs with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is the spiel. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to Flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.
And I actually did find it. So bring this up again next time. But right here, yeah. So the hanging weight is about 60% of the live weight. So it's a 1,000-pound cow. The hanging weight will be 600. And then different types of shares. So, and the amount lost from that too, 60% of the hanging weight then is what you get back for the take home. So, but I'll go over that a little bit more next time. And along with where in Minnesota you can go look to find that, along with other locally sourced goods. So let's start using the local economy here in Minnesota, and let's support each other. We the people.